I did a senior project, and all senior projects were always the last week of your spring semester of your senior year. So it was all rush, 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 go, 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 lots of coffee and all that other stuff to go with it. And so I'd been up all night getting prepared for it. We made our final presentation to the mechanical engineering department, and needless to say, a little fatigued. And there was a question that was fielded about why we did what we did on our particular project. And I had one of these right behind me. I turned right around with the magic marker and went, well, you go from here to here, and drew it right on the screen. Made a nice, perfect 45-degree line across there. And as soon as I did it, I realized what I had done. I was like, whoops, darn, didn't mean to do that, what have you. And we got finished with the presentation, and that was it for my senior year. And I went on to graduate school after that. Didn't think much about that moment, except remembering it that I had done something like that. Literally, let's see, that was 1993, literally 10 years to the day. Same exact room, same exact fold down and everything else. And I go there for a presentation that somebody's doing who's a faculty member, and he rolls the thing down. He goes, yeah, some jackwad sat there and put a freaking magic marker. We've had to suffer with this for the last decade. And I'm sitting there going, I'm the one that did it. Thank you very much. BS&Me, 1992. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it was hilarious, the whole thing. And what was funny was Steve Tipton. I don't know if anybody knows Steve Tipton, faculty member up at TU. Steve Tipton was the senior projects professor, and he's sitting right back there, and he goes, yeah, I was there when it happened. He says, you were pretty goofy that day. I was like, thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Let me go home. And by that point, I had been out in industry, so what was funny was that filtered back to my boss, and he goes, seriously, magic marker? Yeah, I was really tired, and all this other stuff, and the whole thing like that. So anyway, appreciate everybody that did come today. We did get an upgrade in our room here. I'm Jeff Scoville, 85ME. Kind of started up this whole Tulsa Meshtastic group to start getting a foundation for what we were working on. This actually was an outgrowth of a discussion in the Rogers County Wireless Association when we sat down last year and said, what things do we want to do? And we came up with a big long list of things to try out and everything, and Meshtastic was one of them. And that's the way these types of things start, is with just, hey, let's go out there and do stuff. I usually track somewhere in the range of about 150 different technologies in the communication realm at any given time. And what I do is I basically, on a monthly basis, keep a spreadsheet of where things are going. LORA, which is the foundation for Meshtastic, which is long-range communications. LORA's been around for a while, and I've been tracking it for quite some time. I actually bought some LORA devices back in the 2015 time frame. So it's definitely something that's been on my radar, but with 150 technologies, you certainly can't go after all of them at once. So I typically select 2 or 3 out of those groups that end up making the cut, and those are the ones I end up doing presentations on and talking to the amateur radio community about expanding into. Sometimes they take off and by leaps and bounds, like M17. Those people that are in amateur radio know that M17 is really growing tremendously right now, more than we even expected. And for those that don't know what M17 is, it's a amateur radio voice protocol developed by hams for hams, and it has a lot of potential in the data transmission on the same repeaters that we use for voice. Some go that way, and then other ones are ones that I'm still trying to push. And about that time, Scott's going to look back there and say, yeah, Jeff, you've only been pushing on this since like 2005, and that's been HF APRS. I keep trying to hit that drum beat on there, and we'll see if eventually enough people get on the air with that. But, that's why we try this stuff. Some stuff sticks, some stuff doesn't. Meshtastic certainly seems to be sticky right now. It's definitely getting a lot of attention, both in the amateur radio community as well as outside of the community. And I think it's a unique opportunity for the amateur radio community to reach out to those that do not have call signs and talk to them about the ability to get involved in amateur radio and the mentoring that occurs within the hobby itself. So with that, just to get everybody on the same basis, a lot of you guys already know this, but what is Meshtastic? It's a project that enables you to use inexpensive LORA radios as a long-range off-grid communication platform. It's 100% community-driven, and it is an open-source project, so you can take the software, you can make recommendations to the developers, you can even send recommendations to the developers of your own code that you've written and get it incorporated in the main system. If you go out to meshtastic.org/docs/introduction, you'll see a lot of the same information, but this really started as a very community-driven project, which is what makes it neat. The actual LORA technology was developed by a private company that I believe was acquired, and then eventually the company that acquired them has been trying to push the LORA technology. Not getting into the weeds and all of the technical aspects of it, but those that are involved with packet radio and things of that sort will appreciate how far things have come in the last 40 or 50 years. When we started out on the original digital was Morse code. And it's this zeros and ones, just on and off as far as that's concerned. And that's what you call, it is technically a frequency shift key mode, but it's only got one frequency, whatever you set your keyer to. So that was the first digital mode that was out there. Since that point, we started moving from one frequency shift to multiple frequency shifts, where you actually had multiple frequency shift keys. And that's where you hear MFSK, multiple frequency shift key. When you look into FT8, that is a frequency shift key mode where it's actually using different frequencies within the waterfall to transmit the information. And then eventually we got into phase shift key. Anybody do PSK31 here? By a throw of hands, a few people out there. So phase shift key was, I'm not going to sit there and vary the frequency. I'm going to vary the phase of the signal, which means that you actually find the tops and the bottoms of the sinusoidal wave and use that to transmit your information. Pretty nifty right there. Allows you a lot lower signal and noise ratios. Just works really well. Allows you a lot higher data throughput than other conventional modes. So then, phase shift key came along, and then GMSK came along, which is Gaussian shift key. And there's been all these developments, and what LORA is actually what's called chirp. And chirp is where you actually take a frequency and you actually ramp it up. So you have, if you actually look at this thing on a signal generator, you see these ramps all going up across there. And the idea is, versus random noise in the environment, there aren't a lot of random noises that have a perfectly sloped signal that shifts frequency over a certain period of time. And so it has a really great signal-noise ratio for the amount of power that's required to work with. So this is, for those that came from the packet area and were like, wow, that was great to have frequency shift key back then. Literally by an order of magnitude, the signal-noise ratios that are required to make a successful connection are much easier with a chirp type system like LORA versus packet radio. So this is definitely a huge breakthrough in terms of the modulation technology is concerned. And we've seen some pretty crazy things where guys operating sub 1 watt on very high locations, good line of sight, don't get me wrong, are making connections in excess of 300 kilometers, which is over 100 miles. So the reality is, as long as you have that line of sight, as long as you have a path from you to your endpoint, you got a good chance of making it through. Going further into this, LORA is a wireless spectrum modulation technique, came from chirp spread spectrum, better known as CSS. It encodes information on radio waves using chirp pulses, similar to the way dolphins and bats communicate, which it's kind of funny. I actually did a presentation a while back where I actually had some chirp stuff that I'd done on a software-defined radio, and the first thing that my daughter sat there and said was, what are those bats doing right there? What's the deal with these bats? Are they like echolocating on your presentation? I was like, no, it's chirp sped spectrum. So basically the transmission is robust against disturbances, can be received across great distances. It just works. It's a really great technology. Adjacent to what we see LORA and what it does, you have cellular, Wi-Fi, and of course Bluetooth low power emission varieties of ways of sending things. But what you'll notice is all these other technologies, they either have a very high bandwidth at a very short range, or maybe you can get a little bit longer range, but then you have to drop your bandwidth down. LORA has a really sweet spot where your bandwidth is relatively low, because when we were talking about the work that has been done with amateur radio spread spectrum, Arden, if any of you guys have heard of Arden in particular, those bandwidths are on the order of like 11 megahertz, 11 megahertz, 22 megahertz. Those are very spread out signals. Now, when you have great reception and no interference and everything else, you can get megabit speeds through the system. But then if a leaf gets in between there or what have you, you can get no signal whatsoever. It's kind of a feast or famine with the high bandwidth type modes. So you have typically very short range. Typically, they either work or they don't work. The great thing about LORA is the maximum bandwidth that it runs at is, let me see here, it'd be 500 kilohertz. So it's not megahertz and megahertz wide, but it allows it to have enough width to it that it can get high data rates in short locations. And then the neat thing is, if you're willing to slow the data rates down, you get long distance coverage. That's where you'll hear long, fast, long, all those different shortcuts that they have for it are really what the data rate is versus what your ability to receive are. LORAWan is actually kind of a neat thing that's been put on top of LORA, and that is, it's basically a media access control layer. So by the definition of WAN, it's a wide area network. So that's been played around with somewhat. What we're doing with Meshtastic is not LORAWan, but the systems can coexist on the same frequencies and do a lot of the similar things amongst each other. So this it's good information about the foundations of what we're playing around with. Bottom line is Meshtastic uses LORA, which is accessible in most regions without the need for an additional license. Part of the reason this has taken off so well is the 900 megahertz band has a lot of license-free spectrum to it. Some of that is shared with amateur radio. It's always funny when I have this discussion, because when we talk about amateur radio and 900 megahertz, first of all, a lot of people don't even know that amateur radio is at 900 megahertz, because it's not like we got a whole bunch of repeaters floating around on 900 megahertz, but believe it or not, there is a 900 megahertz repeater on the air in Tulsa. It's Tulsa Repeater Organization put it up on the what used to be the City of Faith Hospital, and it's up there. And yeah, it hears Jeff Ideen about once a month right there, just to make sure it's still there. And nobody ever comes back, it seems like, there. So there is also a 900 megahertz repeater down in Muskogee, another one up in Bartlesville, but kind of few and far in between there. Point being is, 900 megahertz, we have an amateur radio band up there, but it's also shared on a shared basis with other users, so it's not exclusive. And but that being said, Meshtastic falls in that area. Basically, when you look at how radio has evolved over the many years, when you go all the way back to the time of Marconi, just the fact that I had a transmitter on the air, and for the most part, everybody was relying upon refraction off the ionosphere to get their signal out to a longer location. Back then, it was all very huge wavelengths, very low frequencies. That's how things started, and you had to rely upon the atmosphere to get your signal anywhere. And ever since that point, we've gone to higher and higher frequencies that don't rely upon the atmosphere, higher and higher frequencies that are more line of sight, higher frequencies that in some cases are more interference resistant. But the main thing behind that is, if you start looking at the progression of radio, it started with central transmitter locations in a really good spot. Eventually, in the 50s and 60s, amateur radio operators put repeaters up on tall towers and mountains and things like that, because everybody was giving away tower space for free back then, it seemed like. Nowadays, you try to get tower space. Okay, do you have your $2 million liability insurance? Would you like to throw a few tens of thousands of dollars for fees and all that other stuff? Not as easy as it used to be. That point being said, what Meshtastic reflects is what we saw happen with the telephone industry, and that was cellular concept. It used to be, it's kind of funny, the Tulsa Repeater Organization, or no, Tulsa Amateur Radio Club repeater that's out east of Tulsa over near Broken Arrow is on a tower that used to be a paging tower. And so it was a high power, high location, covers everything, you know, one size fits all and everything else. What we've seen since that point is the idea of the cellular concept, and that is I don't have a tall tower that's 500 foot up in the air on a long location, what have you. I now have small cells that are set up, and you go from one cell to the next cell to the next cell to the next cell. And so cellular is really the way things have moved. Well, this extends the cellular to say it's not just a cellular tower, it's not just a cellular location, but you are the cell. Your radio is the retransmitter. All of a sudden, your radio is part of the network. That's what meshing is all about. And so what this allows us to do is instead of high power transmitters, lots of feed line, lots of money and all that other stuff high up in the air, you build out the network at the grassroots level by the participants, and every time we get a new person in the network, it extends the range out. So that's pretty neat. Meshtastic radios can be paired with a cell phone. They're not using cellular technology. They're using Bluetooth to pair to that phone. But you have all the screen stuff and everything that you have with your cell phone. So that really makes it a fun application to play with right there. You have all the advantages of your cell phone, and the radio does all the heavy lifting of getting things from point A to point B. Basically, once it gets relayed to the radio turns around and sends it into the network, and the network spreads it from there. And basically, each of the nodes, there's some protocols that are within there that establish when something gets retransmitted, how it gets retransmitted, but the bottom line is there's some algorithms in there that determine who responds first to receiving the message from you so that we're not wasting hops. Typically, retransmission is 3 or 4 times. There we go. Come on, pop back up. You can do it. All right. It'll typically retransmit 3 or 4 times. Those are what are called hops within the network. So you start one transmission, and then it just works its way out. If that reminds you of APRS, it's very similar to APRS. It is pretty much the same idea behind that. However, APRS, FM, frequency shift keyed, 1970, late 1970s modulation technology. This is new technology and much more resistant. In fact, one of the weird things about it is you can have 2 transmitters key up at the same time, and the technology does a really good job of picking up both transmissions as opposed to one or the other, which the FM capture effect has always been something that we've struggled with frequency shift key type modes. When a receiving radio captures a packet, it checks to see if it's heard the message before. So if you do send it into the network and it goes, oh yeah, I got that from somebody else before, it doesn't try to retransmit it because that's just going to make things a mess. But if it hasn't heard the message and all the other rules within the network are met, it says, okay, boom, let me send it out again. And so for each message that a radio rebroadcasts, it decrements the hop limit on there, which then makes sure that we're not just hopping all the time. Back in the APRS days, before we came up with the wide protocol, it was really neat to sit there and send something to the network and watch it bounce around for 3 or 4 minutes, to the point that everybody was irritated with each other, like, just to get that signal off the air or whatever, because it would go from Broken Arrow to Owasso, Owasso over to Sapulpa, Sapulpa back to Tulsa, Tulsa to Broken Arrow to Sapulpa, back up to Bartlesville somehow. And you just watch this thing ping around because there was nothing to tell it stop. So there are really 3 different frequency bands that are used, really 2 different regions worldwide that we'll talk about today. In Europe, they actually have the 433 megahertz region. Because there are no amateur radio operators in Europe, they do not use the 400 megahertz band. I said that one time at a conference. Somebody came up later and said, no, I just heard a guy the other day from the UK. I was like, no, you didn't. They don't exist. But I'm joking there. They share their 400 megahertz band with the license free over in Europe. So there are amateur radio operators over there. They run at about 433 to 434 megahertz. There's also an 868 megahertz band, which I find rather funny because that's plop dab in the middle of public safety and a few other things in the United States. But the funny thing about their band setup is if you're down at 400 megahertz, you can only do plus 10 dBm ERP. But if you go up to 868 megahertz, you can go all the way up to plus 27 dBm. 30 dBm is 1 watt, so it's a little bit less than a watt. But 10 dBm is a tenth of a watt. So, and then if you look at North America, 433, like we said, maximum power allowed for Europe is plus 10 dBm. So that's the packages that you're going to find that are available out there. However, the band range requires an amateur radio license in the United States. So what we made a decision early on as the Tulsa Meshtastic group was we were going to start out in the 900 megahertz band, which I'll get to in a second, precisely to allow some non-licensed people to participate in our network. Because once we go into the 433 megahertz, we don't want to encourage people that don't have licenses getting in there, transmitting and everything else, especially considering that that part of the band might have other amateur radio services in it and start interfering with it. So go ahead.
Is there any 433 in Tulsa?
Repeaters, no, but there was amateur television in that band several years. Yeah. And believe it or not, I think part of the satellite band gets. Yeah, the satellite subband is close to that area, and that's actually become an issue with those that have hotspots because somebody will put a hotspot on a frequency that is a satellite uplink frequency, and then next thing you know, this satellite's getting locked up by somebody with a little hotspot someplace because line of sight's great in space on that whole thing. Yeah, 915 megahertz, which is where we're living at. Maximum output power there is plus 30 dBm, which converts perfectly to 1 watt. Band range is from 902 to 928. Because it is license free, rules of the game are that if there's somebody on that band who you're interfering with, you need to cooperate with that person to resolve the interference. So that means you're not just completely, free to do whatever you want and what have you. You need to work within the guidelines of good practices. I don't know of anybody on Meshtastic that's been approached, oh, you're interfering with stuff, bad things are happening, whatever, but I'm just cautioning that because it is a license-free band, it's not like you just tell everybody to beat feet. When you get a little bit higher than this band, one of the bands that's adjacent to it, up in the 950 range, is studio to transmitter links. And believe it or not, those things have been interfered with before, which does not make a radio station happy. Several years ago, there was a guy somewhere, I think it was Utah. Anyway, he somehow got up into the higher 900 megahertz band. This was not licensed or sanctioned. He gets up in the high part, and he ended up on the input to a radio station locally. So every so often you'd hear him talking and everything else. And yeah, we don't want to do stuff like that. But the point is, when you look at all the stuff that's going on in the 900 megahertz band, we got a lot of other things that are up there alongside us. Instrumentation, metrology. There's also these studio transmitter links. If you go about 100 megahertz down from it, you got all the public safety stuff in the 800 megahertz band. So there's a lot of stuff near us. So what that means is, as we start putting up sites that are at higher and higher elevations, we're going to have to figure out ways to filter out some of that interference to be able to keep the sensitivity of those radios where they need to be, because there's just a lot of stuff there. It kind of reminds me of looking at a 2-meter radio that came from the early 70s, and if you've ever seen those that are, these are the ones that do not have a digital readout. You actually turn dials to go to frequencies and everything else. And this thing was so broadbanded that you could hear 3 repeaters on it at exactly the same time because there was no front end to keep it from going otherwise. That's kind of where we're at today with the current technology, is the front end of these radios is fairly not filtered. So the point I'm making there is, don't be surprised that if you put a Meshtastic node up adjacent to somebody like a cell tower or something like that, you may get desensitization. And you're like, man, why isn't this thing hearing me? What's going on with this and everything like this? That comes with the territory of having to work at sites that may or may not have other things co-hosted and co-located near them. So that's the disadvantage to being in the 900 megahertz band, but at the same time, it's something that as amateur radio operators, we can overcome. Go ahead.
What frequency are LED lights?
All over the place.
I mean, because I do see a response to it sometimes.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can see them flash, and I'm
Yeah.
wondering what frequency they're at.
They're all over the place, honestly speaking. I've seen very broadband interference, literally from sub 100 megahertz all the way up to about 400, 500 megahertz. And some of it is IF interference that gets in the front end of a radio and stuff. But the bottom line is they're very bad. Because of the way they're set up and some of the filtering isn't good on them, they can create tremendous radio interference. Yeah. The other thing that they can create is if you're putting instrumentation out, they can create a lot of problems there. Up in Joplin, Missouri, I do testing up there, and we have 4 to 20 milliamp circuits that we run from all our instrumentation. You turn those LED lights on there, and everything just starts jumping around because I'm getting interference off of off the lights. So quick pro and con to using 915 versus 433. No amateur radio license is required in 915. Yes, it is required over in the 433 megahertz band. Big thing here for us, we can do encryption in 915. We can't do encryption on amateur radio. It's specifically prohibited in the United States. And what's funny is we're one of some countries that don't allow encryption, but there are other countries that do allow encryption. So it's not universal to the whole world, but in the United States, if you start encrypting, you're going to get in trouble. 915, you're limited to 1 watt. 433, you're limited to 10 watts. Station must identify every 10 minutes. No, you don't have to do that on a license-free band, but yes, you have to do that if you're on 433 megahertz, so just something to keep in mind. I encourage people experimenting with 433. We probably will expand into that area, but the real question is going to come up is if we start expanding into 433 megahertz, how do we do it in a way that does not encourage license-free operation in that area? Because ultimately, if we've got people that are licensed stations repeating non-licensed traffic, you're in the equation of potentially losing your license or facing FCC enforcement out of something like that. So as we go, if we want to go into 433 megahertz, that's something that's going to have to be addressed of how do we limit access to a network so that it doesn't get out of hand there as far as that's concerned. But I think it's something that will eventually evolve because the 433 megahertz band has less line of sight characteristics to it. It's a cleaner band because it doesn't have all the stuff that's in the 900 megahertz band adjacent to it.
Hey,
So.
Jeff, on that, no encryption or yes encryption on 915.
Yes.
How about when you add the antennas to it, to the radio?
Yes.
Since, it extends the range and everything.
Yes.
And is that something that's involving AM radio with it or what?
Now, what they say, let me move back to here, is the important part. Effective radiated power. Doesn't say power from the transmitter, doesn't say power from the amplifier, it says effective radiated power. That means including the antenna, including the feed line, your effective radiated power cannot be above so many dBm. So what this means is, like the 1 watt limit, if you've got a half watt transmitter, you can put an antenna that takes you all the way to 1 watt ERP. You can increase your radiated power. However, if you have a 1 watt radio and you put on, let's say, a 9 decibel or 10 decibel antenna on it, which effectively increases its power output by 10-fold, you're going to be in violation of the amount of power that you're allowed to radiate. So the key to that is, yes, you're allowed to use an antenna, but the ceiling is 1 watt for your output right there. So you can't go above that. So that's the key. Yeah. And I can tell you, I've seen some people, go ahead, Tony.
I just questioned under what FCC part does this fall? 15?
Yes, this falls under Part 15. Okay. Yes. So the point being is you are limited, and here's the interesting thing. Even though amateur radio is known for kilowatt amplifiers, 1,500 watts, and everything else, anything you do that spreads spectrum is limited to 10 watts output on it right now, currently today. So even if you go, and the thing I mentioned on this is, this takes me back to the days of doing repeaters. The broken arrow repeater, the 9-1 repeater, the funny thing about it was we lost a power amp, didn't realize that it had happened, and we were putting out less than 1 watt for quite some time, and people were still talking on it, even though its rated output when everything was perfectly good was 50 watts. So the point being is the difference between 50 watts and sub 1 watt, the difference between 10 watts and 1 watt, you go, oh, that's everything in the world or what have you. The reality is you're still going to hear a signal in many cases right there, because I talk in dB, decibels, and when you go from 10 watts to 1 watt, it's only a 10 dB difference, which, by the way, an S unit is 6 dB. So it's a little over an S unit difference, which in many cases, if you're getting the signal already, one S unit's probably not going to make all the difference in the world. The reason I mention that is don't get caught up on you've got to have this huge killer signal out there, because even in the 1 watt region, you can make some very good connections. And with the modulation scheme that we have, the chance of that signal getting through is increased. It's not like FM or sideband or things of that sort.
Jeff,
Yeah.
you might mention that, you're talking about the decibel increase on the antennas, what they're rated for.
Yes.
A good idea here is to calculate your feed line loss.
Yes.
If you have not 1 watt, figure out what your feed line loss is for the distance you're running, and don't have the antenna higher gain than the feed losses, so that your effective
It all balances out, yeah.
there with 1 watt, basically,
Yeah.
or just under.
Yeah. And the other side to that is, because I think somebody just posted recently in one of the Meshtastic groups about how they put their antenna at the top of a tower someplace. Did anybody see that posting out there where somebody said they made a run, like I think 25, 50 feet up in the air? That whole coax run that you've got is going to have a huge amount of loss in it. So that's the reason why you see all the kits that we've got out here. Everybody's got their antenna sitting right above the transmitter, because feed line loss is killer at 900 megahertz. It is huge.
We actually have a chart in there later.
Yeah, it's in the presentation. So this kind of gives you an idea of what you're capable of doing. As you can see, short range turbo, 500 kilohertz. And you'll notice, however, the link budget for that is 140 dB. So you got to have a really strong signal, but you can transmit up to 21.88 kilobits per second, or effectively that would be 21,880 baud. And Brad's sitting back there going, man, if we had that back in the day in the 1980s, I wouldn't have been sitting over that computer until midnight every night trying to read my messages. 1,200 baud forever. But that's great, but your link budget really hurts you on that. As you go all the way to the opposite end, there is very long range and slow. And on that one, you get 0.09 kilobits per second, so you're very slow. However, it only uses 62.5 kilohertz of bandwidth, so it pulls the bandwidth in, so your link budget now goes to 161 decibels, which means that you pick up 21 dB worth of link budget by going to that mode. So the point being is, the slower you go, the more range you have, the faster you go, the less range that you have. So there's trade-offs right there. Where we operate, what the one that is the default that we use is long fast. Yes, long fast here, which is right here, which is kind of an in-betweener, because it's 1.07 kilobits. Notice 0.09 kilobits versus 1 kilobit. So it's 10 times faster than the slowest mode. Has a little bit more bandwidth to it. Has a link budget of 153 decibels. Not as good as very long range slow, but not as bad as short range turbo. So
Actually, it'd be 100 times faster, right?
yeah, actually it would. Yep. So the point being, go ahead. Somebody had a question?
Hey, how bad is the free space loss? About 100 dBs a mile, or just so we get an idea?
If you're looking at about a 3-mile connection right there, your free space loss will be right around about 110 to 115 dB. So, because the thing that you're going to be up,
For 3 miles, you said?
yeah, for 3 miles. And the reason for that is trees, metal fences, buildings, building materials, stop signs, you name it. 900 megahertz is very, very well absorbed by those things and does not refract around it. If you had X-ray vision and could see radio waves, if you keyed your handy-talkie on 2 meter and looked out there, you would actually see the waves kind of go through that doorway and kind of, they refract around the boundaries and they go someplace and everything else. If you key up on 900 megahertz, bam, it hits metal and goes, sorry, no more on this whole thing. It's very line of sight. So that's the difference of what you're working with when you get into the microwave bands. So after we talk about all that, there's lots of hardware out there. Some of you guys have already purchased hardware. Some of you have not. The Heltec V3 is a popular one right now because in many cases it comes with the case, which is a nice thing to have there.
Except the battery won't fit inside the case.
Except the battery won't fit in the case. It's like, okay, you have the case, but how do we get the power to it? T-Echo, T-Beam, T-Deck are all products from LilyGo. The T-Deck is a great concept, but it still is requiring a lot to become usable because the user interface of it is still in flux. The one that I see a lot of what you would say the pros run with because it's got very low battery usage to it and just a lot of fun are the rack products, the Wish Mesh Pocket, and then also the Meshtastic Starter Kit. That's one of them right over there.
D2 model of the Wish Mesh Pocket.
Yeah, and Rack does a really good job there. Because this is a big area, we actually created a link on our webpage called Gadgets. If you go to tulsameshtastic.com, we actually list all these gadgets. We give pros and cons for each of them individually, and there's even a table that gives a summary there. Matt was a tremendous contributor to putting all that stuff together in a PowerPoint presentation, and you never knew it was going to get published on the website, did you? He's like looking there probably going, what the heck? I've seen this before. Yeah. But anyway, get your hardware to start with, and the great thing about it is the hardware runs anywhere from $30 up to probably about $100 a piece is about the range. I'd encourage you, just try something. You know, for $30, that's that's an expensive lunch or an inexpensive dinner or whatever type thing. You're not going to break the bank by making that investment. And then as you figure out what you want, continue to refine what you want as far as equipment. And the neat thing is there's enough people coming into this, you probably can sell your equipment to somebody else that's starting off. And next thing you know, all the prices will go down to $2 a piece or something like that. Who knows? Who knows? You'll find them at the next Hamfest for $3 and $5. So, yes.
Quick question, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to confirm it. So, instead of something like we would do with APRS and have our call sign dash whatever.
Yep.
These are going to be MAC addressed, right?
Actually, we have our own naming scheme in Tulsa, and what we've done is we've used for the short address, it is the closest airport code to where you're at with a 0 to 9 number behind it, which by the way, those have already been used up, a letter behind it, capital letter behind it, A to Z, or a lowercase letter A to Z behind it. That's your short. So you'll either be like toll 0, toll 1, toll 2, toll A, toll B. That'll be your short identifier. Then on the long identifier, what we've done is use that same short identifier. That's the beginning of it. So you'll be toll 0 again, let's say. And then we use what 3 words, which is based on your GPS location of your home base, so to speak. If you're a mobile one, and if you're a fixed one, it's the location of where the node's going to be. And what 3 words is a system that if you put in those 3 words, you enter in their website, they'll give you your location within 10 feet, GPS-wise. So you'll see the names around here will be like mine is toll 0. I can't remember offhand right here. I have to go off memory there, but it's had 3 words behind it.
Grass, foxhole. I see that one a lot.
Yeah, that's one of them. Okay. And so you'll see all those come out with 3 words on them, and that's the way that we name the nodes. And we figured that was, number one, it gave you the location even if you didn't get a location packet from that particular person. It also allowed us to have a unique identifier that you could have multiple nodes and do things of that sort.
So I see, if I do this, I see myself having 2 nodes.
Yeah.
One at the front of my house, one at the back of my house, kind of north and south.
Yeah. So this would be perfect.
I don't see it being practical for me to have this up on a tower or a pole or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So once you get your hardware, make sure you set it up properly. Make sure you do the right things. One of the biggest things, believe it or not, and the hams understand this, but the non-hams don't always understand this, and that is you attach the antenna to your Meshtastic unit immediately. Don't power it on or do anything with it with the antenna off and say, well, I'll get it on here in a little while, because most of these devices do not have what's the term they use, crowbar or other protection on them to keep the full down the power. So it will push that full power out until you see the magic smoke come out of a part of the actual Meshtastic device itself there. And what's funny about the whole thing, I keep after this stuff very much myself and the whole thing. My son got a Meshtastic device. The first thing he did, pulled the antenna off, puts the battery in the back. He's trying to put the antenna on, killed it right there on the spot. And I'm like sitting there going, you are the son of an engineer. You're not supposed to do these things. But those things happen. You verify the polarity on the power source before connecting to the Meshtastic unit. This is a big deal, especially when you have those flat top batteries. And if you turn them the wrong way, you'll get lots of magic smoke. It's not just a small amount. You will burn out whole components. You will have a really good time with it there. It's a way to make a little, if you have a device you don't like, it becomes a smoke bomb in reverse there. It's great. Look for the plus and minus stamped on the circuit board. Make sure the cable polarity is correct, because that's been a huge thing with these batteries. Some of them don't have the polarity the same way as the board does and everything else. Sometimes I even wonder if some of the guys that are putting these things together are colorblind, red, black. What does it mean here on this whole thing? They don't always do it the right way. When in doubt, get out your volt ohm meter and check your plus and minus and make sure you don't have a bad connection. You will need a USB data cable, because that's the way you program your Meshtastic unit. That's the way that you put in the firmware. That's the way you do everything. So you have to, and by the way, not only do you need a USB cable, but it needs to not just be a power only cable, it needs to be a data cable. There's a lot of these cables they sell as charging cables, and they're no good for programming. So make sure you've got a real USB cable. Most are USB-A, USB-C, a few are micro USB, depending upon the units that you go with. The Meshtastic unit has a built-in interface chip in it. You'll need to install the device driver in your computer prior to connecting the Meshtastic unit to your computer. Make sure that you get the right serial drivers on there so that things work properly. Once it's connected to your computer, you'll need to look at Device Manager and make sure the COM port is set properly, because when you go to connect on the web client, things like that, it'll say, hey, which COM port it's connected to, etc. You need to make sure you know which one you're connecting to. Most embarrassing thing I've done so far in there is I have an old Cantronics TNC that for some reason I have never taken off of my computer, and I tried to connect on in there and I hit the wrong serial port, and I'm getting question marks and weird stuff coming up there, because it's definitely not a Meshtastic device. As with any RF communication device, the higher you can mount the antenna, the better. That just makes all the difference in the world. It's amazing to me that I've actually heard people that have set these up in their basements and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, I'm not getting out. I'm not hearing anything. Got to get elevation to it. Got to get it to a point where it can see other stuff that's out there. Do not use a large, long feed line. I can tell you right now that for various reasons, I run over 100 feet of feed line on my property over in Broken Arrow for my 2 meter stuff, because where I have to mount my antennas because of HOA stuff and everything else has to be remote away from the house. And even in that case, I take a fairly large loss being over 100 feet. I run LMR 400. I've seen people with the little tiny coax going on 900 megahertz trying to go 50 feet, and it's like you just destroyed your signal. You're not going to have anything coming out the other side. If your unit's mounted outside, extreme weather conditions will have an impact on battery life, especially what we just saw recently with the single-digit temperatures and everything. Basically, anything below freezing for a lithium battery is non-chargeable territory. You should not be charging the battery. Best case scenario, if you charge it below freezing, it will just be very inefficient. You'll be kind of destroying the battery. The life of the battery won't be what it's supposed to be. Worst case scenario, you will have a battery fire, because you will eventually get to a point, and in drone racing, we had that happen at an event one time when we had a lot of freezing temperatures out there and we had batteries sitting below freezing. We actually caught one on fire as a result. So below 32, don't charge the battery. I believe it's 4 degrees Fahrenheit is the point where you shouldn't really be drawing current on that battery. People have gone below that temperature and operated below that temperature, but you will see the life of the battery tremendously diminished, because you're basically working in an area it wasn't intended for. So that means we just can't do low temperature operation? No. Your buddy is looking at sodium batteries out there. And sodium batteries have a larger temperature range to them. I've posted on the Tulsa Meshtastic site, and there's a larger temperature range that you can get to with sodium batteries. They're the latest and greatest technology. And they're expensive, exactly. But the neat thing, if I remember right, on the sodium batteries is they're not nearly as volatile as the lithium batteries are, and so they don't go poof and cause fires. We actually had a member of our local Tulsa drone racing group who burned down a house as a result of a lithium battery fire. He actually had them on the charger sitting in his garage, and he went inside, and he was asleep, and his family was in there as well, and he heard like a sizzling sound out in the garage, and so maybe those batteries are in trouble, whatever, opens his door, and the entire garage was engulfed because of a battery fire. So lithium batteries are not something just to leave unattended and do things of that sort. You need to be very careful with them because they will run away on you. So depending upon the battery type, the battery's effectiveness can be permanently affected if you attempt to charge the battery extreme cold or heat. Worst case scenario is not only that it's affected, but you have an immediate response where it decides to react in a way that you didn't expect. First thing you're ever going to do whenever you get a new device is you're going to flash it. And the first time I presented this over in West Tulsa, I had to very carefully explain, because it was the church that I was explaining at, that flashing was a software-based flashing, not a personal flashing. Because when I first said flashing, eyes this big right there. What are you talking about, Jeff? I'm like, flasher. And then even when I said that, I was like, no, that's not working either here. I'm going to have to explain this. You need to select your device by clicking the button circled, and once you get it all lined out, this is probably the easiest step to get set up for a device. However, you need to make sure you select the right device, do the right things, get it all squared away. You select the firmware you want. You can select multiple versions of the firmware. I would say probably if it says beta and on the cutting edge, that's probably not the one you want to be running. There's countless stories of people that loaded the beta software and they're saying, they're going, man, this thing's rebooting, it's doing weird stuff. Well, you're working with the experimental software, so try to maybe in some cases go a few versions back. So go ahead.
Terminology backwards. I think it's
Alpha, sorry. Alpha's the real cutting edge, yeah. Yeah, alpha's the cutting edge, and so beta is the one that's been through a little bit of testing. But all the same, you can go back a few versions. Like, for example, I believe the latest alpha version that's out right now is 5.6.18 or 20. 20 is actually out. 20 is out now.
I think 20 is the beta right now.
It's
like 22.
or 22. Okay. So that's pretty far out there. The point is, there's some of us that are still running 5.6.6, 5.6.7, 5.6.5. It's just the reality of what there is there. So what I'm saying is, you don't always have to be on the latest and greatest. Certainly, if there's a feature that's been added across a certain one, you're going to want to get to that version. But on the other hand, latest and greatest doesn't always mean that it's the most stable, because it is a moving target. Go ahead.
And once you flash this firmware, you don't go back to a lesser one. You can't do that.
Oh, you can. You can do anything you want to right there. When you flash the firmware, it just erases what's in there and puts in whatever you want to. Okay. So, yeah, unlike Microsoft, it does not force you to upgrade. And Bill Gates will watch this video and not be happy. So.
Just remember, there's a checkbox when you flash it to tell it you want to erase all contents.
Yes.
You want to be sure and turn that on.
Yeah.
When you flash the firmware.
Yeah.
Don't leave that unchecked or unturned on when you go to flash it, because you may not end up with the result you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, and the best thing to do is just wipe everything out and go that route. So, erase the old, put the new. Yeah. You'll see a progress window, and like I said, do yourself a favor and do not interrupt the process. The more impatient you get, the more problems you'll have. Then the next thing that happens after you've done all this flashing, and by the way, software flashing, not personal flashing. By the time you've finished all this, then you're going to be sitting there configuring your unit, which is done with the Meshtastic app or the Windows client or something of that sort. You're going to go in and say, okay, let me get all the settings right on this whole thing. So a hardware configuration device can be done with the Meshtastic app for iOS or the Android. It can also be done using the web interface and connecting to the node. Personally, I find the app's a little bit more user-friendly versus the web client, but you can go either way there. The great thing about the web client is any web browser will run it, so that's convenient from a standpoint of being able to get in with any device. But the flip side to it is the apps they've got a lot of neat features to them that are a little bit more intuitive in what you're working. Steps provided here for iOS. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, Jeff, how does that show up as a web client? I mean, what do you address? You're not using an IP address.
Yeah, you go to, I'm trying to remember what's it called.
Serial.
Okay.
Client.meshtastic.org.
Yeah, and then you select serial.
Be a serial.
Yeah, so what you'll do is you'll take your device, there's a couple ways to do this, but you'll take your device, if you plug it into a USB port on the computer, you'll go to client.meshtastic.org, which is actually going out to the internet, grabbing the client. Then it's going to say, which serial device do you want to connect to, and you'll pick the one that's connected to your device. If you put your device on your Wi-Fi network, then you'll go to the IP address that was assigned to it there.
So I'm thinking about it from accessibility.
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
I believe you have to use the Chrome browser to do the flashing.
That's what I.
For flashing and everything else, Chrome is absolutely required. Yeah. Firefox. So this is, talks about what you do with the iOS version. You start opening the Meshtastic app. I'm not going to read every single one, but basically give it a pin, do the things that you need to do to get paired to it, and do all the stuff that you're going to do. That does keep others from trying to configure your device with your pin and things of that sort. You'll also see which region do you need to set it to, because it is specific to the region in the world as far as the radio.
ITU region?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the pin on screen, if your device does have a window, it's automatically set when it flashes it, it's set to use a random pin.
Yes.
Again, if you don't, 0.6 there, if you don't have a screen on your device, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the default.
Yes.
So
So the next thing we have here is for settings for LORA. First thing you're going to do is tell it that it is United States region, obviously. You use your presets, and then you're going to set it to long range fast, like we talked about. Ignore MQTT is off. OK to MQTT is on. That is a web service that you can connect to. I strongly suggest that you not get into that until you get this thing on the radio and do things of that sort, because otherwise you're not really doing radio. You're not really doing anything with this. You're just on the internet on a web server. Transmit enabled is on. Believe it or not, that's one that if people don't turn it on, you're not going to be transmitting. You'll see stuff. Number of hops 4, frequency slot 0, frequency override 0, and then you're going to set your transmit power to 30 dBm, which is 1 watt. Even if your device is a little bit less, if you set to 30 dBm, it will then set the maximum power on that device.
Yeah, I thought the frequency slot was supposed to be 20.
It is channel 20, but it will actually be set as, yeah.
And the important thing is, remember to click save before you exit that screen.
Yes. Yeah, if you don't hit save on this, then none of this stuff, hit save. So the next thing that you'll do is set channels, and the easiest way to do it is with QR codes. So if you scan these codes, you can either do it with add channels or replace channels. And basically the idea behind it is that you're setting, in our case, there'll be 2 channels in the Tulsa area. There's the default channel, which is the one that everybody can chat on, and then we have a Tulsa Mesh channel, which right now has the exact same encryption key on it, but in the future it will have a separate encryption key that will be sent out on a regular basis to members. So let's say you couldn't make the QR code work, or you're like me, you don't trust the QR. No, I'm just kidding. But if you want to do it manually, you click on primary channel, you don't modify any of the channel details. That's an important thing because some people modify it and then they can't connect to anybody. Positions enabled on, approximate location. Approximate location is kind of your own personal choice. It's if you don't want people to know exactly where you're at, but pretty close to it, then you use approximate. There are some weird people in this world that if they see APRS or anything else or any other information, they'll show up at your doorstep and check you out. I don't know. You click save, you click add channel, then you're gonna add the Tulsa mesh, key size default, and then the AQ equals, which will be the automatic one. Then you're gonna say secondary channel, allow position requests off, and save. So that's that'll set your channels, get you working. By the way, these channels are not radio channels, they are chat channels for talking to other people. Your channel's not changing per se because you went in and have a primary channel, and you can have, I believe, up to 8 channels, I believe is the total there, that you can have for chatting with your friends. And you can come up with private channels and things of that sort, but those are not radio channels because they go out over the same frequency. Then you're going to set up your user, which, by the way, we'll get to in a second, like I was talking about, the toll 0 and toll A and all these types of things. So you'll have a long name, can be up to 36 characters. Short name is up to 4 characters. It worked out very conveniently to use airport codes because they're all 3 characters. All airport codes are 3 characters, and then we just added something on the back end of it. And by the way, we have provisions for expansion beyond our current system. If we get that many users, we have other ways of adding codes on the back end besides 0 through 9, A through Z, uppercase and lowercase. We have some thoughts of where we can go next if we have to.
Where are you up to now?
We are up to E, I believe it is, uppercase E. So, yeah. Ham radio operator, license operator off. What that does is toggles the encryption and a few other things. Since we're not running as hams because we're running this as an open network, click save again. Make sure you hit that save as you go on.
Every single screen, because if you get off of that screen and you didn't hit save, you'll get to go back to that screen and re-enter, redo everything you just did.
Yeah.
Until you hit save before you exit that screen.
Yeah.
So,
The Tulsa Meshtastic group has a naming standard. We encourage you to participate. If you go up to Tulsa Meshtastic, there is a page called Apply for a Node Name, and you enter all your information in there. Then I turn around and send you your naming convention out there, so it works out pretty easily. You're not required to participate in it. This is something, believe it or not, there was somebody that sent me an email and got all upset about this. Oh, you guys are becoming the naming Nazis, and you're going to turn all this information over to the government. And back there, there's a few people laughing about that whole thing. But it's like, no, we're not doing this. This is a hobby. This is fun. It's all going to be good. Calm down. It's all going to be good. The reason we're collecting this stuff mainly is so that if we have a problem, we know who to contact and can send you an email and say, hey, did you know that you're like IDing every 2 seconds or something like that, doing something annoying? It's not intended to get anybody in trouble or collect information.
To apply for a node, if they were outside of Tulsa area,
Yeah,
would that still be okay?
absolutely. We have airport codes for the entire state of Oklahoma.
You know, they have a map too, Tulsa Meshtastic map.
Yes.
It shows all the nodes around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have the map up there too as well. So, talked about the naming convention. I'm not going to go tremendously into it, but the airport code for your closest airport and stuff like that. Select whether you're fixed or portable, latitude, longitude, owner's email address, click submit. You'll get an email back from there that says, hey, this is what your name is. When name changes are applied to your node, you'll need to save and reboot your device. That's obvious. There is a bug, and I'm not sure that they've completely figured it out, but there is a bug occasionally that your name will default back to the default, which is basically your MAC address code. And I've seen it happen. I had it happen to me, and all I did was change batteries on my setup, and boom, everything went back to there. So keep an eye on it once in a while, because sometimes they will spontaneously go back to something weird. So.
DOK Tower's done that 4 or 5 times now. I don't know if y'all noticed,
Yeah.
but thankfully it didn't drop the remote admin PSK, so I can still link into it and put it back.
Set it back, yeah.
Yeah.
So, big question people ask about is your device role, which we have a slide that talks about roles. This is an area that has lots of debate online and everything. If you want to get into something in which everybody's right and nobody's wrong, it's a great place to hang in there. I kind of joke on that, but it's kind of, there are preferences to it. But the point is, client, I'll start with client. Client is somebody who's just trying to be part of the mesh, and it's not super user crazy or anything like that. You're just being part of the collective, so to speak. However, what they've discovered is, what happens if Jeff has client sitting here and client sitting here, and client sitting here, and client sitting here on the stage, or they're only a few feet apart, what's going to happen when I, boom, send something out? If something out that far out doesn't hear the signal, these are probably going to try to repeat it amongst themselves. So I'm going to use up hops in, you know, a very small space there. So client mute says, you know what? I'm a client. I want to send something out originally, but I'm not going to repeat other people's packets because I'm just trying to send my own stuff out and move on with things. So client mute, if you have a pocket, mobile type setup, or stationary node that's very poorly placed, then you do client mute. That's the preference. If you have a well-placed area, which I like how Greg sits there, it says second floor window, roof, attic, etc. That's probably a pretty good place to say, now you're getting a little bit more sophisticated. If you have a good, well-placed that you think you can help other people get into the network, then go for client. If you have multiple nodes for camping, set them to client. But the idea is, for example, in my house, I've got the one that's up on my tower, but then I've got the one that's in my living room that is not very tall. I don't want to sit there and steal somebody's hops trying to get it through my little node that's sitting in my living room, so I put it to client mute. Rebroadcast mode, all info broadcast, the node info broadcast interval 1 hour. Usually leave everything else defaults. And once again, hit that save, otherwise you'll get to do it again. These are all the different modes that are out there. And basically there's even client hidden, which is a device that only broadcasts as needed for stealth or power savings. Or if you're afraid that we're going to take your information and give them to somebody. There's the tracker one that only broadcasts GPS positions. There's a lost and found that's used for device recovery. Sensor, if you're doing telemetry packets, it gives it priority. This is where the big discussion happens here, is repeater, router, and router late. Basically, if you're a repeater or a router, you better be in a good location. Because if you're in a poor location, you're going to steal hops from everybody. Because there is, for the clients, there is an algorithm that says, we're really trying to get out to the farthest client away from you and giving them preference to pass on your information. So if I have a series of nodes, and this one's just this far away and there's one farther out, the way the algorithm works in theory is the one that's farther out is the one that's first going to retransmit your packet, not the one closest to you. Because otherwise, if I, like in a room like this, we have 5 nodes sitting here, it'd go bing, 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 and I'd use up all 5 hops just sitting in the room here and I'd never make it anywhere. Like a ping pong ball. If you set them all to repeater, it will do exactly that and use up everybody's hops. So only make yourself a repeater if you're at a very high location. Router is the same way. The difference is repeater will not show up on a nodes list. Router will show up on a nodes list. So if you want to show up, you need to configure as router. Router late is an infrastructure node that always rebroadcasts packets once, but only after other modes, ensuring that the coverage for local clusters. So the router late, how long has that been around for? Does anybody remember offhand? It's about a month or so. It's relatively new to the scene, but people are using that as a configuration.
I haven't really found useful effectiveness for it yet.
Okay.
One other thing about like the routers and repeaters is not always kind of take up hops, right? But
Yes.
if you have a client somewhere that's in an even better position than a router or a repeater, if that client hears that router or repeater broadcast the message, it won't rebroadcast it.
Yes.
Because it's like, okay, well,
It's like, hey, somebody took care of it. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why the naming is important to do right. Position, broadcast interval, 60 minutes. Yeah, if you really want to make everybody unhappy with you, put like 2 minutes for your broadcast interval and just bing, bing, bing all the time and use up the whole network. That's a good way to have people, if you don't have your 0.9 mile offset there, that's how you get everybody to come to your front door and check you out right there and say, wait a second. Minimum interval, 30 minutes on smart. Minimum distance, 100. GPS, if you have a fixed node, there's really no reason to have it pulling the GPS because it's just going to use battery power. But if you're mobile, you probably want to set your GPS 30 minutes. Position flags, only enable the metrics you need. things such as altitude, satellites, timestamp, etc. All their options can be usually left at the defaults. And now you got position set. Once you get through all this, say hi, open the app, send a message, and there is a primary channel or Tulsa Mesh. You can also select a private channel being one of your friends. So if you know somebody's name of their device, send them a message to them. Say, hey, how you doing? Of course, we say all this stuff, and people say, is there anybody out there? Is there somebody to play with? And I think I'm up to pretty consistently about 80-some devices that show up on my map on a regular basis for the Tulsa area. So there's people out there. It's happening. This is just an example of what we see. In fact, if you get over here, there's the Bethany router over that way. Over even in Rogers, Arkansas, we had somebody show up on the network.
What are the different colors for?
That's an excellent question. I don't know. I don't know how the colors are defined on this stuff. Anybody know offhand how it picks the colors? It is random?
No,
Okay.
Actually, I think it's based off the MAC address.
Okay.
Because I've reset nodes and the MAC stays the same, but the color didn't continue.
Okay.
Yeah, it never changed.
Cool. That's an excellent question that I did not know the answer to there. Here's a close-up of our area. You can see RVS, Riverside Airport, 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We do have some people that aren't following the convention. Like I said, it's optional whether or not you want to follow the convention. It's to your advantage because it just makes it easier. But bottom line, this is the way we've got it set up. Lots of people that are on there.
You can always change that MAC address into whatever you want.
Oh, the name. You can't change the MAC address. MAC address is hard encoded to the device, but you can change the short address and the long address to anything that you would like. First question everybody asks is, how do I increase my range? And the correct answer is not a power amplifier. Yeah. If you said power amp, minus 10 points and you get to go out the door. Just kidding. But power amplifier, and I'll say for several reasons. First of all, these devices are very basic transmitters, and the excitation mode, this chirp that they use, is not exactly friendly necessarily to an amplified setup. It's not to say you can't do it, but as they say, dirty in, dirty out. If you have a dirty transmitter and you put it into an amplifier, you're going to be sending out now strong dirty signals. So amplifier is not the right answer. What you want to do is get a decent antenna. Now, when you normally buy your device, it comes with, let me see if I got one over here for show and tell. It normally comes with this little stubby antenna to it, which is the equivalent of a rubber duck right there. It's nice and compact and everything else, but not very high gain. It's not built for that. So you can first start with the higher gain antennas that are in that same configuration, that are kind of the rubber duck configuration, like these. And then you can graduate on to fiberglass antennas of all sort. Curiously enough, at 900 megahertz, fiberglass antennas are a pretty good deal, because when you start talking 2 meter and 440, the big problem with the fiberglass antennas, they have a tendency to flex in the wind. They have a tendency over a period of time to get fretting, and eventually they will fail. I think 2 meter, if I have it up on a repeater tower, usually about 5 to 7 years is the most I'll ever get out of it, because it just does that. Because these antennas are much shorter, they do last in the outdoor environments. You can go everywhere from 5.8 dBi, 6, 8, 8.5, whatever you feel like. But the point being is, those type of antennas typically look like this. But you'll notice, short coax run, get to my radio, move on. Don't try to sit there and put 50 foot of coax on this and say, let's go. Because all that gain you just picked up in the antenna, you just got rid of by going through a small pipe.
John, what about the practicality of running remote power? I mean, if it's USB, and you use USB power only to a node that's
Absolutely.
mounted outside,
Yes.
that should be doable.
It's very doable.
And what are you using for weatherproof enclosures?
You can pretty much buy anything from like a electrical supply companies and stuff, things that are considered to be weatherproof, which I'm trying to remember what the NEMA number is for weatherproof enclosures, but you're basically going to look for the ones that don't trap rain in them and things like that. They have the black plastic O-ring seal around the outside. Those are the best ones to do for this type of thing.
Of course, obviously the boxes have to be plastic and not metal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And just throw the whole thing in there, antennas and all, right?
No, normally what you do is have the antenna come out of the box, and then it goes into the box, and then inside the box you keep all your electronics inside there.
There's where your quarter wave coax comes in.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But you can do it that way. The other way that's very popular, and Don's got one of them with him today, is if you're going to set this thing up, you put a solar panel on it and have the solar panel recharge whatever's inside there, and it pretty much takes care of itself. The neat thing is, as we start expanding out to other locations that may not be necessarily our personal homes, it's a lot easier to have a self-contained power and everything else to go with it versus now I got to run USB up and do all that. Yeah, Paul.
So how well did that external one do in the super cold weather?
It's funny you say that. I think it lost power because I don't have any transmissions on it since we got really cold weather.
Yeah.
And I just pulled this down last night, and it's funny, it's all fired back up. I just sent a message to him to test it out, and I honestly believe the cold weather affected it.
Yeah.
So maybe it stopped recharging.
Well,
Yes.
I think that's what you're correct, but whatever. Even though I had sunshine and, 4 degrees outside,
Yeah, the battery is.
the battery didn't charge.
Yeah. So that's the downside to having something like that is if you do get really cold temperatures, you got to have a battery that can survive through that. Yeah. Yeah, he'll come back.
Not necessarily, so,
That's
and
the
I've
argument for remote power.
Yeah.
heard that the rack BizBlock platform, either the 19007 or the 03, the solar charger on them, it has a board that it will ramp down the power to the battery if you're using it through the solar
Yes.
on the board. It will ramp that down in extreme temperatures. And if those boards lose power, they cannot turn themselves back on. You have to disconnect the battery. And
Yeah. Yeah. The racks, that's the big downside to them is they have a hard time coming back if they have a power loss.
Well, we want to obviously avoid that.
Yeah.
Well, mine's down on my roof right now, so I gotta go get it.
Yeah. I noticed that because I was like trying to send you a message the other day. I was like, uh-oh, I guess he got hit by the cold.
So what are you guys using on EOK and down there in Shadow Mountain?
Solar and charging a battery.
What kind of battery?
What do you have on there?
Flat pack, 10,000 milliamp, maker focus battery.
Yeah.
That's what we've been using. Thankfully, they haven't gone down.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, honestly.
They're more temperature resistant.
No,
No.
they're not. We've just got
Right.
really like it so far.
Yeah. To be blunt about it, because you've got that extra capacity, the fact is when they started derating because of the low temperatures, they just didn't get to a point where they dropped off like a smaller battery would, like a 3,000 or 4,000 milliamp hour would. But they definitely were in a degraded condition during that time, no doubt.
Now, if you had a battery management system on your LiPo 4 battery, for example, the battery management system would tell it, don't charge this battery.
Yes.
Under extreme,
Yes.
it's not just extreme cold, it's extreme hot as well.
Yes.
So it's like 32 degrees Fahrenheit and it's like 140 Fahrenheit. So if you get outside of those two ranges, don't try and charge a LiPo 4 battery because you won't be happy with the results. You will likely be replacing that battery.
And all the equipment that was next to it.
Yes. They'll take it all with it. So just out of curiosity here, this is some good Feedline data right here that takes you from RG8X. As we all know, the stuff we put on repeaters every day of the week. Just kidding. You put RG8X on there, you won't go very far. But it really pushes home the idea of what length does to you. If you look, only 2 foot long. If I put 1 watt in, I get 0.94 watts out. Hey, that's pretty good. But by the time I get 10 foot of that stuff running out there, I'm down to 0.72 watts. So that means that I lost 28% of my signal over 10 feet. So guess what happens if I have 100 foot of that? Won't have much left coming out of the pipe on the other side. So your next step up from that typically is heliax, 7/8 inch, 1.25 inch, or even the 2-inch fire hose variety out there is always nice. But you'll notice you can run a lot longer with that, but it's not going to be $2 a foot for heliax right there. I think the last heliax run that I did for a repeater, God, I think we spent over $2,000 on the heliax run easily. So the point being is, heliax is great, but the problem is you're going to put a lot of money into it. And you can see the 400 megahertz band is a little bit more forgiving than 900 megahertz is for losses. So if you signed in today and gave your email address, you'll get a copy of this presentation. So don't worry about the fact if you didn't get all your notes down from the whole thing. Yeah, I encourage you to get onto there. Now, first place I'd like you to go to would be tulsameshtastic.com. That's a really good resource for information about what's going on in Tulsa. It also has a lot of information about setup, software, hardware, things like that, breaking news. We also have a Google group. Go to Groups Google, Meshtastic-Tulsa-Network. That's a great place to get what's happening right now, like the news I sent out last night. Hey, by the way, we're moving to the Hardesty Regional Library. Hardesty. The other H. Meshtastic.org is always a great source for information of how to get started. They put a lot of time into their website, and that's been good. Austin Meshtastic is also a great site there. Those guys have really been at it for quite some time. Here's an instructional video that was put together, a Meshtastic unit setup. That was yours, right, Greg? So that's an instructional video on how to get your particular node set up. And then, above all, send emails to either Greg or myself there saying, hey, got a question, need some help, anything of that sort, and we'll get back to you there. That's the reason why we're meeting as a group and doing these types of things.
Tony, you asked earlier about an outdoor node and parts. On the Tulsa Meshtastic site, there's one of the options in there talks about the parts list for an outdoor solar node, if you will, like that. So there's a part list out there.
I'm thinking that, in my case, an outdoor node with remote power would probably be the best way for me to approach that.
Yeah, the only concern you have if you're gonna run USB over a long distance is it does have a length limit.
Well, yeah, but if you're doing it power only, you can wire in a USB connector, put a 5-volt regulator at the end of the run next to the node, and you'd be good.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I'm not talking about running data over that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you that are amateur radio operators, check out the Voice over IP net on Monday evenings. It's at 7:15 p.m. every Monday night. What are you laughing about, Paul?
Good ad.
Good ad right there. Got it in there.
That's what you call a promo.
Promo. This is the promo tape right here. Yeah.
Shameless promotion.
Shameless promotion right there. Yeah. Anyway, the 444.35 repeater up in Claremore is a place to get into it. 443 over in Tulsa land. The 14709 repeater that's up in Claremore. There's a lot of different ways to get into it here locally. Go ahead.
This is probably, you kind of touched on the 433 thing earlier.
Yeah.
Is that being looked at as a, shall we say, a long haul link between cities?
Yes.
Okay, and that's where, is that really where the amateur component of this is going to come in?
Yes, absolutely. But the big question that gets raised, and this is something that a lot of us have had discussions about here.
Yeah, how do you filter out the non-amateur?
How do you filter out the non-amateur traffic? This is the discussion that's been going on now for about 2 months between me and a few other privately in the whole thing. And that is, what is the definition of third-party traffic and how does it get applied to digital communications? The reason being is that if you read the regulations and you read them the way they were originally intended, I believe, it says, if I'm carrying third-party traffic, I got to be there with the person who's holding the microphone. I can't sit there, give my radio to a friend and say, hey, come back in a week right here and you're third-party all week long. There are some people that are interpreting saying third-party traffic, as long as I just make a statement that John here is authorized to use my call sign between now and now, and I posted it up on a website someplace, then that's as good as third party whatever. It's like, well, no, you have no ability to shut them down if they screw up.
Is that any kind of discussion that's been floated up to the ARRL?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm a little
yeah.
behind the curve.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. What I'll be blunt about what our small group, there's a small group of us that are discussing there, is we are considering approaching either ARRL or FCC about a deviation, basically, that would allow for that public traffic to go over those amateur frequencies with special controls in place, such as making sure that you've got a lookup list and things of this sort and everything like that.
So a whitelist and
A white list and blacklist and what have you. And so we're considering that. And we realize we're getting into kind of a questionable area because, I mean, as an amateur radio operator, I'm not excited about people that don't have licenses getting on my frequencies.
No, and I get that, and that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons I'm bringing it up.
Yeah. And that's part of where things get to be a little bit, you know, how do we address this as far as that's concerned.
Okay,
So.
well, I guess I'm sorry to divert it.
Oh, it's no problem. No
I'm
problem.
curious more than
Yeah,
anything.
I was in the middle of my public service announcement for the greatest net ever on the internet. But seriously, 147.090, 444.35, 443, any of those repeaters. And if you have a hotspot, you have lots of other different ways to get into it, including M17. Basically, it's a great place to join up with us and share stories and everything else right there as far as what you're doing. There's also, I'm sorry I didn't get it on the presentation, there's also the Maury TechNet that's on 147.090 on Thursday nights at 8:30. Yes, 8:30. So you can pop up on there, and Stephen runs that net. It's a great net that we talk a lot about different subjects there. But the point is, if you're an amateur radio operator and you're impatient enough that maybe sending an email or whatever, or maybe you've got a question that's hard to phrase, jump up on the air. We'll help you out. We'll have a good discussion on it. Shameless promo finished. And it ends with questions, and more questions. Anybody got any other questions? Go ahead.
So the settings that you have displayed on the screen, are those the correct settings? So if I want to go to Preston or Wilkie?
Yes, absolutely.
Do we have show and tell here to see all the different?
Yes, we do. We got plenty of equipment. I know Greg brought his stuff. I know the guys from Oklahoma City brought some of their equipment. Don's got equipment. There's a whole bunch all around here, so great opportunity there. We'll even send some messages between them. If there's anybody that would like us to help you set up today, this is a great opportunity. We're setting at about 11:40, so we got a little bit of time there. So.
I got one other silly question you probably covered and I missed it. Access to the nodes from a client perspective,
Yes.
app, is there an app or is it all, web-based? And if there's an app, is it iOS?
Yeah, there's iOS and Android apps to connect to them.
Android is not accessible friendly.
I know. But iOS has an app for it. It's in the App Store. You download it, and then
Just out of curiosity.
it's the Meshtastic app.
Just Meshtastic?
Yeah, Meshtastic.
All right.
And you basically pair it via Bluetooth to your device. Boom, you're off and running right there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what's confusing because the node it's not your phone.
That's right.
No, the node is the node, your phone is the
Yeah.
client to the node.
Yeah.
Your phone is just the interface telling the radio what to do.
And
Yeah.
it's your display.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is.
It's not hooked up to cellular, even though yours is hooked up to cellular with your mobile
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah.
But you could use an old used cell phone.
You could put your phone in airplane mode and you'd still be able to talk to your radio.
Right, but it's.
Yeah.
Assuming you don't turn off Bluetooth when you turn on
Sure,
your.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. This is a node. End of story. This is a node. If I pop open the cover, assuming I can do this without. This is the LilyGo T-Beam.
Is that the Supreme?
No, this is the predecessor to the Supreme. There we go. Trying to be careful not to hurt the antenna on it. So this is a node, okay? And so this all self-contained takes care of everything. When I turn on the power to this, it will actually display on this display unit, so the messages are going across and everything else. It doesn't have a keyboard on it, doesn't have all those things, and that's why you then tether it to your phone and say, hey, I'm giving additional functionality. There are nodes that have display units. There are, like the TDEC is one of them. So in that, there's a really good display unit, one being sold by Spec 5. And so there are some other opportunities. If you want it all in a one device, you will pay more money for it, obviously because of that. But this is the node, this is where everything happens at. Your phone just tethers to it to tell it what to do. So your phone is not the device doing the work.
And with regard to the different devices, some of them have GPS in it, some of them do not. The presentation that Matt pulled together and is out there on the Tulsa Meshtastic site, it lists some of the different units and which ones have GPS, which ones don't.
Yep.
So for example, one of the little Heltecs, and this is a different case, this is a 3D printed case, but the Heltec V3s, they don't have built-in GPS. So if you want GPS on this, you're gonna have to share the GPS from your phone, the GPS location from your phone, to the device over Bluetooth, right? Now the T-beams, like what Jeff held up,
Yep.
T-beam, it has a built-in GPS. So if that's something you're interested in, you just, it's kind of like picking a car, right? You have to decide what feature you want. Some people, they say, well, I wanted to have a USB-C plug, not a micro USB plug. Well, guess what? The older T-beams, they have a micro USB port. So if that's something that's important to you, for everything to be USB-C, then you know, look for different models. But there's a lot of information out there about different sites, different features on different units. So
Yeah.
I mentioned the rack wireless 4631 and the board Sean was talking about earlier, and then in 003 or 007, the 003 main board that everything, you know, your chip plugs into, it doesn't have additional spots for other modules to be plugged in. The 007 board, you can plug in GPS, and they have a slew of other modules that you can plug in. People are using these things like on their farm to monitor soil conditions and all kinds of things with their animals and so on and so forth. So there's lots and lots of options with the rack 4631s. And I brought a couple of different versions of the pocket size
Yeah.
rack devices, and I've printed out some pages here with some literature on these. If you're interested in a pocket size one, don't have one yet, you might stop by and grab some of these, or ask any questions I might be able to answer. But the rack 4631 is probably the best battery efficient small boards.
Have we approached any, like, a lot of times people are asking me what the weather condition is, where we're at, especially, is there a way that we can, what was used is talking about extra modules, like in?
Yes.
Okay.
You can put in extra modules that can be used to report temperature, humidity, things like that.
When,
Yeah. Wind. Yeah.
This morning I seen something, someone's home assistant come up and did the weather. Is that anybody here?
Not me.
I think it came from KTUL's website. Somebody was forwarding out the weather.
What was it?
Yeah.
I thought it said something about home assistant. I wasn't sure what automation was set up there or how that happened exactly.
Yeah, I saw something like that yesterday, yeah.
Yeah,
TUL something.
like 7 o'clock this morning, I think.
Yeah.
It was.
Okay, he was doing the weather report yesterday.
Yep, that's me. So you,
All right.
Good job.
Thank you. That's cool.
You did the weather.
how are you doing it?
So there's a custom integration for Home Assistant to connect the, any of like the nodes to, Home Assistant or Serial. So I have like just a spare rack board that I'm using. And then just Home Assistant integration to send messages.
that's very cool.
Yeah. Took a little bit of trial and error to kind of get it to not suck.
is that the live activities thing that you're talking about?
Sorry.
Live activities?
Mhm.
Okay, I saw a post where somebody was talking about live activities, and you can turn that and enable that on your phone for the Meshtastic app, and I thought, so.
Jeff, question?
Yeah.
This is starting to look like the ham radio disease I had, where you're gonna have multiple units.
That's right.
And your problem would be what exactly?
Yeah. I would say, yeah, I would say start out with one for home and then one portable to go around. And the reason I say this is if you buy just one by itself, you're dependent upon somebody else to do testing with and things like that. If you get two, you can make sure everything's working like the way you want it to be done, and then you grow from there. And then you get 10, then you get 30, and then you get 50. And
But your cell phone app is smart enough to know which one it's connected to?
yes.
You can only connect to one unit at a
One at a
time
time.
with a phone.
But the app will give you a pick list as to which node you want to connect to, obviously.
And whichever one, the last one was that you connected to, when the app comes up, it's gonna try and connect to that one. But you can go back and you can, like on iOS, you can swipe to the left and it'll remove that one, the one you're connected to. It'll remove it, and then you can add, you can go in and now go to your pick list, like you said, and pick the one you wanna connect to.
So you'd have to pick it from the Bluetooth devices in settings.
No. In the Meshtastic app
It's in the app
itself.
itself, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly.
Yep.
Thank you.
Paul, I might give a little story about when I started. So I ordered a rack 4631007 ending number and board, and I put that up in my attic space with a little bit of an upgraded antenna. I used a piece of wood trim to get it close to the roof, as I could up there, and a 110 volt extension cord going up to a USB adapter that goes to the cord. And that thing works fantastic in the middle of Owasso. Then I ordered one of these that I leave on all the time in the house or take it with me when I go. I got another rack 4631 board. Those are about $30 to $40. It's mounted in the back of my pickup truck with a large deep cycle battery that'll probably run it for a year or two.
Oh, okay.
Because they're very low draw, but those ones that I put in the attic and in the back of the truck are just basic boards, about $40 each.
Yeah.
A pre-built one like this is about $99 plus shipping's kind of high from these guys, but like Jeff was saying earlier, this thing's got a battery in it that'll last like 5 days or something.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. It does have the screen, and you can get one same internals here pretty much. Much smaller battery, no screen, works just as well, a little easier to carry around than one of these. And I bought two of these so that I could set up one somewhere like at the entrance of a building, like at Hamfest, and have it repeat to one that you're carrying around, walking around, or everybody in the building. It could repeat out to my truck in the parking lot, which will repeat out to something else, for a few hops. But yeah, if you can put one up high at your house and then get a portable one, you're game on pretty much just at that point.
Right. Is there a real utility to having a unit with a screen on it if you're really got your phone with you all the time?
No.
It's just convenience of carriage is what it boils down to.
I
But
see them as
yeah.
battery drain, because they don't really show any pertinent information that your phone wouldn't show you otherwise.
Kind of what I was thinking.
You're more than welcome to look at mine and check it out.
While we were here, I love when I sent my little test message out there, bleep, 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 all of a sudden out of here. I was like, everybody's got their stuff turned on. This is the web client, and as you saw when I came up there, for those who are watching closely, I actually connected into the device. So I'm going to do this. Yeah, I'm running. Yeah, I'm running way behind on the firmware in this one. This is my portable unit that I take out with. So the first thing that you're going to do if you want to use the web client, because we were talking about, how do you connect it to your device? You're going to go to client.meshtastic.org. You're going to let it do the connection through. Notice I'm running Google Chrome here.
Any Chromium-based web browser.
Yeah. Edge will do it too.
Edge, Brave,
Yeah.
Chromium.
Yeah.
Doesn't like Firefox.
No Fire, yeah.
No Firefox, yeah. Firefox, no.
You just thought you were gonna get back in. On your,
That's taking right. Whoops.
oh, there it goes. Hang
Is
on.
it going? Yeah.
Waited for you to threaten to move back over.
That's right. It was like Gotta go now.
Yeah, that's what I felt.
Now a good time to play the Jeopardy song.
That's right. Okay, it says no devices. So I said, I want to add a new device. And it's going to say, is it a HTTP, which would be you've got your thing running on Wi-Fi. I can even do Bluetooth if I want to do Bluetooth, or serial. Curiously enough, I already added the device, but if I hadn't, I'd click on, I turn off my alarm there. If I didn't have this already set up on here as a number, I would hit new device and add it as a new device on serial, and it'd say, hey, it's on COM port 3. That's why it's important to know where you're at. Well, in this case, it's already been set up. So all I do is click on it, and it says messages loading, bang, bang, and there it is. It just came up on the screen, and I'm off and running. And I can send a message out right now in the main channel. Hello, world. And there it went to everybody. You can hear the bleep bleeps that just went there. So that's the web client, and that's one way of connecting in. It's probably the clunkiest versus the app and everything else, but it gets the job done if you need to get things done on there. Hello again from Greg.
And why it's displaying UNK, that means it's an unknown node, it's not showing my designator.
Yeah,
For some
Changed
reason.
information yet?
yeah. World is busy. So did you guys learn something today?
Yep.
Good. All right. That's why we do this stuff. We got some time left over here. I don't know that we have anything scheduled after this. I'll have to see if the library's okay with us continuing to shuffle around here and everything else. Worst case, we'll move into the main area and do things out there. It's fine as well. But I personally have to, at 12 noon, do the M17 net, so you'll see me disappear for a little while here while I'm doing that. But there's plenty of people, Greg and others, available here. Yeah, go from one thing to another. It never stops.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. All right, thank you.